Hey guys, Steve Moran here with another episode of Foresight TV. If I seem a little out of sorts, it's because was in Nashville at the ACA NCAL conference. I saw so many of you had so many great conversations. It was just like the coolest thing. You've probably seen some of our content on LinkedIn. We've got a ton more stuff. I was inspired to do a brand new series that it might change my whole life, and I think might change yours. Today, I am joined with Abby Ritchie, who hosts our Tech Tuesday, and Max Zamkow. Did I do that right, Max?
That is right, and most people don't get it right, so well done.
And I've known Max for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. He is a passionate investor in early stage companies that are creating technology for older people. And I'm just really, really excited to dig into what you're seeing and how you see that world and where we're going. But before we get started, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here.
I think they captured like your animated essence perfectly. I don't know who did that drawing, Steve, but they got you right on.
Well, I'm going to give Rachel Hill, our creative director, the credit for making that all happen. We actually have somebody, believe it or not, that we found on Fiverr that creates this for us. My favorite part is I can never get my glasses to sit straight on my face. I don't know why that is. I've played with them and it just doesn't seem, no matter what I do, they seem to be crooked, and they've just gotten it at the right angle. And we've been using that for about 1.5 years. And every time I watch it, it still makes me smile.
Good.
So Max, let's actually start with and talk about who you are. I'm always really interested in how did somebody get here? So I'd love to have you just talk about what inspired your interest in tech for older people.
Sure. Thanks, Steve, and I'm excited to be here. So as Steve mentioned, I'm Max Zamkow. I lead an early stage VC fund called Third Act Ventures that invests specifically in age tech. And the way I got here, like so many entrepreneurs in the field, was from a personal experience. So going back, this is about a dozen years ago now. My grandmother had just reached that age where she couldn't live by herself anymore. My grandfather had passed away a couple of years before. The house she was in was too big for her to manage herself. She had a couple falls, all the things that unfortunately happen to us as we get older. And so my father and his brother and sister, they kicked into action. They did what, everyone generally thinks that is the right thing to do in this country, which is go find a senior living facility. So they did a lot of research. They went on a bunch of tours with her, picked this place up in Massachusetts near my uncle, and they moved her in. And everyone was really excited. She was going to, have this community of people to have activities with, all these, care around for her. But despite all that work and effort and those wishes, she just became a shell of herself as soon as she walked in those doors. It was really jarring, particularly from someone who up until then had been just like the most talkative, gregarious. When she called me, I'd have to cancel my schedule for at least an hour. I could not get her off the phone if I tried. All of a sudden now she was hanging up on me after 10 minutes. And not because she had all these friends and were doing these activities and having a blast, which would have been fine with me, hang up on me and go have fun. But because she instead was just incredibly depressed, not connecting, very lonely, barely eating, barely sleeping. It was she was a different person. And that made me want to do something. I loved her so much. She was an amazing grandmother. But I was on the other side of the country. Back then, I was living in the Bay Area. She was in Massachusetts. So I couldn't be there in person every day, every week, even every month was hard. So I looked around for other ways that I could help. Back then, my first career was in mobile technology. I graduated college right when Steve Jobs started letting anyone make iPhone apps, and I had friends dropping out left and right, starting companies. So I was like fully immersed in this world. And in this new paradigm where technology no longer came with a 100-page manual, it was just open, tap and go. I was like, okay, like my grandma could be using this. She's not super tech savvy, but like she could be using it. There's got to be something for her, or like that I could use to help the nurses do a better job, whatever it was, and was just shocked at the lack of options. And so that kind of had been simmering in my mind ever since. And when I made the transition from operating to investing, I looked back in on this field and saw more happening, which was great. But the two biggest impediments I saw were not enough entrepreneurs building for this space. And for those that were, few, if any, sources of early stage capital to help them get off the ground. So that's why I started the firm. This was about 8 years ago now, and still going strong. There's still a lot more to do, but I'm really excited to see all the progress we've been making.
Yeah, I love hearing your story. It's so touching, and so many of us we're in senior living because we've had an experience like that, and it really reminded me hearing how much your grandmother declined in that situation. That happened with my nana as well, and it was startling to see the transformation in just a couple of weeks, and how she had gone from living this vibrant life to just declining. And it's enough to make you want to take the next step and do something about it.
Yeah. And it's not meant as a dig at senior living, because I have lots of other friends whose parents and grandparents absolutely thrived there. They became like Mr. Mrs. Social, bingo, game, outing, organizing. So it is possible. It's just there are some, whether it's places or people or whatever it is, that it works for, and some that it doesn't. And we need to figure out how to fix that for everyone that moves in.
So I'm gonna take a little detour here, and I'd actually like to pick your brain a little bit more, Max, about what is it that the operators could have perhaps done differently in order to give your grandmother a better experience. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I will be the first one to say that I have no operating background. I have no idea what it takes. So my opinions are worth exactly that. However, what I'll say is I feel like what they missed out on, and what is often a challenge, moving anywhere is always a challenge. Doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or 50, or 80, 500, whatever it is that we get to soon. It's hard to make new friends. It's a lot of effort. And particularly when you're older, if you don't have the energy that you maybe once did, it's much harder for you to come in, make friends, connect, and create that community. I feel like those first few days, weeks, months, you have to almost treat it like a dorm in college. Like I remember when I moved into college, we had the RAs having us play all these dumb games, but they were icebreakers to help us get to know each other and to make it easier for us to create a community quickly. Yeah. I don't know how much the operators do this, or they did at her facility, but I do think that there's probably opportunity to really focus on that. Because if you can make that transition, which is already full of so many challenging emotions, and maybe it's not possible, I don't know. But if you can make that happy and smooth and create a few friendships right off the bat, I think you're golden.
I love that. I didn't book my hotel in Nashville until way too late. And if you do, you probably do enough traveling to know that right today, hotels in Nashville are more expensive and harder to come by than they are in New York City. and I ended up with what was available was massively expensive and way away from where I needed to be. And so I'm on the board of directors for Abe's Garden, which is a world-class dementia community. Plus I've got an independent in the AL. I said, can I come stay in your guest room? And so I lived for 5 days in this community. And most days I was, I got in the first night at midnight and it was out every day. But on Wednesday, I was done with the conference about noon, and I spent almost all day Thursday. And so I spent just a lot of time interacting with residents. And it was so warm. The first evening, the Wednesday evening I was there, they were doing a little social with mulled cider. And I got to talking to this gentleman who lives there. And he says, and I don't know exactly how it came up, but he said, hey, I got this group of guys that have coffee every morning. Why don't you come join us? And so I got up at 7:30 and went and hung out with the guys. And it was just, I was ready to move in. It was just, it was ordinary, but extraordinary at the same time, because it was just camaraderie and telling stories and looking at things. So let's move to technology. That was actually really helpful. And I'm going to actually write an article on that. You have inspired me to talk about those first.
Speaking of that, though, I think that there are so many people like you, Max, who are creating technology, but don't really have that operator or the resident experience. Oh, yeah. And so anytime that you can get in and you can see how your fabulous technology will actually impact these folks and this staff, it's going to make your technology all the more valuable to the community.
I'd even go one step further to say it won't just make your technology more valuable. It will actually turn what you're making from something that may or may not work to something that is vital.
Right.
Many of the companies I've invested in, the successful ones, started by doing a lot, Steve, like what you did, and basically moving into facilities for weeks or months at a time to really fully understand the perspective and the wants, needs, and desires of the people they were building it for, be they the residents, the staff, whomever. One of the interesting things about this space is that few, if any, people are building tools for themselves. So you think about any other startup space, whether it's crypto or B2B products or, consumer products, most people who are successful build things for themselves or people like them. Mm-hmm. You don't do that in this industry. And if you try to build something for you, but you're trying to sell it to other people who are not like you, it's not going to work very well. So you really have to find a way to live, breathe, and work with the people that you are building for.
So what kinds of technology, what are you excited about right now? And well, actually, let me back up a little bit. What have you invested in, either specific companies or conceptually, and what's working? And if you're willing, what have you invested in that bombed?
Sure. So a couple that I've invested in, one actually relates a little bit to what we were talking about that first 90, 100 days. Mm-hmm. Company called TSO Life that just raised a Series A. I'm very excited. What they do is they automate the resident intake interview. So when people move in general, most places conduct an interview just to try to understand more about you, what you like, what you don't like, favorite sports teams, hobbies, etc. Traditionally, that was written down on a piece of paper, given to the activity director. And this activity director by themselves has 70, 100, who knows how many of these to sift through. There's no way one person could remotely remember all the things or make those connections. What these guys do that's really great is, first of all, it's just all you do is you use an audio device, your iPhone, to record it. So you don't have to write anything down. You conduct the interview. This technology, processes everything that's said and finds all the different pieces of information that can be helpful and used later on to help make your experience better. Whether it's you say that you're a Yankees fan and it connects, it tells the staff who else in the facility are also Yankees fans, or maybe Red Sox fans if you want to create a little rivalry, have some fun. Or if they played that day, it'll tell, whoever's coming in to take care of me that, hey, the Yankees played yesterday. Why don't you talk about that with Max when you go in, to help personalize that care and make it not seem so cold. And that's just the very basics of what it can do. But essentially, it's taking people's preferences, making it really easy to make those connections in kind of an automatic and seamless way, in a way that no person could ever do, which is amazing. Very excited for them. One that bombed, I invested in a company that was trying to bring direct to consumer hearing aids and audiologists. Now, the FDA just cleared hearing aids to be sold over the counter, so maybe they were a little too early. But the other reason why I think this company didn't make it is that the founder was not in it because of a personal mission. They saw an opportunity, which still exists, and they went for it, but they didn't jump in with both feet. They kind of dipped a toe, saw how it was. It was starting to work, and I think if we'd given it a little more time and found a way to stretch it out another 6-12 months, it would have worked out fine. However, when you have a backup plan or you're not in it for the mission, you try it, it doesn't work exactly like you want it, and you say, okay, I'll go and do something else. And so that was one that I was sad about, and I wish I still had an investment in another hearing aid company, because it is an excellent time to be doing that, and I am on the lookout.
I think it's really important for entrepreneurs, for investors, for anyone who's passionate about what they're doing, to know that some of these things that you're going to love and you're going to want to see come to fruition, that they're just going to fall down and nothing's going to happen with them. And yet you still have a hard hold on it, right? Yeah, I get that. And I know Steve does too, because we're entrepreneurs, and, we have a lot of things that we want to see happen. And then there's just those orphan tasks, right?
Yeah. It's one of the hardest things for operators or anyone who's buying these technologies to try to make a difference in the organizations and their friends, families, colleagues, whomever it is. When you work with, things that are on the leading edge, new things, sometimes they don't work out, and there are a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. And that scares people from trying. But if you don't try, then nothing's ever going to change. Mm-hmm. And particularly if in an industry that is struggling in many different ways, if you don't try, you're not going to make it. So you can't be afraid of some failures along the way, because that's the only way to make it to success.
You bet. So I'm going to take just a break here. Speaking of technology, new technology, I got a word from our sponsor for this particular episode. You solve a little problem, but it's a little problem that happens a million times a day, which actually makes it into a big problem. And that's sort of how older people interact with the TV, and that the TV really is this great tool that gets suboptimal use, and you really crack this problem in a really amazing way. So why don't you just sort of give me 30 seconds for the audience about what Cavo does?
What Cavo is good at is all things TV. So communicating through the TV, content management through the TV, anything you'd want to overlay on your TV, messaging, that kind of stuff. So we're really, really good at all things TV.
So I don't know whether you've looked at those guys, Max. I don't know. They're actually particularly looking for additional capital at this point in time, but they have really solved some difficult TV challenges that is really cool.
I've definitely seen a few different TV, like set-top overlay providers. I am curious. I don't know exactly which one is going to win, or if there's going to be one or many, but it's a natural thing. You know, older adults, the technology that they're most used to using are TVs. They're the things that kind of grew up in their lifetime. So if you can make something that adds more functionality to the TV and lets them do things in a way that is very natural for them, it's a win.
Yeah, and it takes up the largest amount of wall space too.
That
So
too.
if you can combine it there, it's also
Yeah. The two big things they do is that they've solved the HDMI problem. So you can plug all these different resources into a single box, and you can say, I want to go to Roku, I want to go to YouTube, I want to go to Netflix, and voice command it. And then the other thing that I really like about it is that if your grandmother is living in Massachusetts and you're in San Francisco and she wants to watch something and she can't figure it out, you can actually get on your app. You can turn on her TV, put it on the right program, and you can then actually see that it's really working there. And so what's really neat about it, and it particularly is great for staff, right? Because it means people don't have to run back and forth. Do you have any thoughts on VR?
I do have thoughts on VR. I think VR is really cool. I don't think VR has figured out a real use case. Pretty much in anything except for maybe video games, and even then, the games that have been created so far in VR have been pretty subpar. That's why people are still playing with mostly other devices. I have seen a lot of people try to use VR for therapy. That one I'm slightly more bullish on. I don't know enough, or I don't know if they've done enough research to know if someone will do it for long enough, if it's more than just like, this is cool, and then 3 months later they're like, I don't want to do this anymore, and if the benefits last long enough. But they've been able to show that VR can replace or reduce the need for opioids and other antidepressants, all sorts of things. So I think it's interesting there. I think that VR is still in maybe not even inning one of where it's going to be. And so there's a lot more development needs to happen, both from the content and the technologies point, before we start to see it ubiquitous anywhere, but particularly in senior living.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even for me, I've got a pair of VR goggles that my wife gave me one year for Christmas. And if I'm honest, it's sitting under, I know exactly where it is. It's sitting under my bed gathering dust. I played with it for a while, and it just, it wasn't good enough, right? I mean, it was an interesting novelty.
It's a toy right now, and it's just like a toy that ends up people play with for a little bit and ends up sitting under their beds. But there's a lot of money, a lot of people that are very invested in making it better, and it will get there. Now, I can't tell you whether it's going to be in 2 years or 20 years, but it will get there eventually.
Yeah.
Out of your various ventures, what's something that you're really, really proud of?
That's a challenging one, because I'm proud of so many of the companies. I mean, it's one of the nicest things about investing in age tech is that they're all working to make life better for older adults or their caregivers. One that I'm quite proud of was an early one, also in the senior living space, called Eversound. They make wireless headphones that senior living facilities use for activities, and they work a lot better than hearing aids. There's no stigma, unlike hearing aids. They're designed specifically for older adults. The founders spent a lot of time living in facilities at the beginning to help design them. And, it seems from the outside like a small thing. It's like, oh, they're headphones, what's the big deal? But when you move into one of these places and your hearing isn't great, which is pretty common. I mean, we're all going to lose our hearing as we get older. My wife is already complaining that I go all the time. When you can't hear, even if you want to connect, even if you want to make friends, you can't do it. It's just impossible. If you can't have a conversation, how's that going to happen? So these guys come in, Eversound comes in, There's no stigma. They look good. You put them on, and all of a sudden, you can hear. And there are all these stories of people who were non-communicative, non-eating, or like singing and dancing as soon as they get these on. So it's just amazing.
I have worked with a couple of residents before who I'll say, well, why aren't you going to the dining room? And they'll say, it's so noisy in there. I can't even hear anything, even with my hearing aids. And so because of that, they isolate.
Yep.
And that leads to other problems.
Of course.
Yeah.
So where do you see, what are you looking for? You talked a little bit about hearing aids as being one of their areas. Where are other areas that you see great opportunity in technology, and where you'd be interested in investing?
Sure. Anything that helps with workforce, whether it's recruitment, retention, satisfaction, anything that helps make these places better to work at, help make them easier to work at, anything that improves quality of care. Workforce was an issue pre-COVID. It's become even more of a hot button through COVID, and it's not going anywhere. We already have a deficit of caregivers that's only going to get worse. So anything that can make a dent in that, extremely interesting. Outside of senior living specifically, really excited about a lot of the things that are going on in Medicare, particularly now that they're allowed to reimburse for non-traditional medical expenses. There has been an explosion in companies all trying to serve all the different needs of older adults, from helping make sure that they are living in a safe, warm environment with food in the fridge, helping them get to and from doctor's appointments or even just friend dates, helping people not have to leave their home if they don't want to, and help them move into the right facility when it's time. So that's an area I'm extremely excited about. And we're seeing a lot of things going on there.
Cool. As you look at, do you have any thoughts on robots?
I do have a few thoughts. I actually do have one investment in a robotics company called Labrador Systems, and they make what I lovingly refer to as an autonomous side table. It's essentially a side table, kind of like you'd have next to your bed, that moves around, can raise and lower, and actually like switch out trays from different areas, and really help someone who may have some mobility issues, may have trouble carrying things from one room to the other, be it food, laundry, dishes, whatever it is, really help them stay living in their house comfortably. I did not think that I would invest in a robotics company for a while. And most of the ones that I've seen so far, they're fun. They're kind of like VR. Like, I love those social robots. They're really fun. I have a hard time seeing people using them for longer than a few months and then unplugging them, because they're just like, whether it's annoying. I had a Furby back in the day. That thing I didn't even know how to take the battery out of. That was annoying. I think my brother threw mine in the pool at one point, which was totally fair. Wouldn't shut up. But most of the robots have been more socially minded than utility minded. And then I found Labrador, and Mike and his team are amazing. Mike actually helped create one of the iRobot robots, the Brava, which is the floor mopper, which then got bought by iRobot. And he worked on Lego Mindstorms a while ago. So I figured if anyone was going to do it at this point, it was him. And I've been really excited about it. I have also heard of a lot of robots being used in dining rooms, which I think is good. I think there's still a lot of opportunity for those robots even to do better and to automate some more of that. But I think it's still early for the most part, but we are starting to see some real use cases. So I'm watching intently.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the robot-like devices provide so much potential to pick up tasks that humans are doing, so that humans can go do the human thing. There's an article, I think, in Inc. magazine a few weeks ago talking about Starbucks problems. And what was fascinating, the title was something like all Starbucks needed was a new blender. And the point was that most of their business today doesn't come from coffee drinks. It comes from cold drinks that take quite a bit of blending. And that if they could make a machine to do all that blending, they get better, more consistent quality, and they'd use people more effectively. And I look at robots as being this thing. The one other area that you haven't really touched on, and maybe you don't have passion for it or interest in it, is that it feels like there's a lot of data that we're collecting in senior living, but just about older people in general. And almost so much data that we hardly know we've got all this data, and the question is what do we do with that? And are you looking at anybody that's trying to work with that?
Absolutely. I will say with data, you've hit the nail pretty much right on the head. We've been creating and storing data for decades now, not just about seniors, but like all companies have been warehousing all this information, and we still haven't figured out very well what to do with it. AI development over the last few years has really grown leaps and bounds. So there's opportunity now that there wasn't a few years ago. In senior living or just older adults in general, there's a lot of talk about using data as they call it predictive analytics, basically taking in that data to see before anyone else can, or even before it happens, whether there's going to be a fall or someone has a heart condition or something is coming on that you can hopefully prevent. I haven't seen too many, if any, that have been able to actually execute on that successfully, whether that's because the data that we have isn't enough or right, or because the AI just isn't there yet, or the right people just aren't working on it. I don't know. I don't pretend I don't have the expertise to make that judgment call, but there is a lot of opportunity there to have better outcomes, make people's lives better, prevent issues, extend the ability of staff. It's not just robots. Good data can do that too. So it's definitely an area that I am watching, that have made a few investments kind of around that area. And it is one that, again, I can't tell you if it's going to be in 2 years or 20 years, but it's going to be so incredibly important. The ability to use the data, not just to create the data.
Yeah. So one more question for you. We're about out of time here, and the last question is, and I think somebody even posted a comment earlier. But if somebody's listening to you and says, "Oh man, I got the next great invention, I want to tell Max about it," how do they find you?
Sure. Easiest way is to email me, max@thirdact.vc. Also on LinkedIn. Or Twitter, although I don't check Twitter as much. But yeah, just reach out. I do eventually get to pretty much all of my emails. It may take a little while, so if you don't hear from me in a week or two, feel free to bump it back up. But yeah, again, I'm always looking for things. The most important things for companies that I invest in, is that they have to have the product. It can't be just back of the napkin yet. I've invested a little bit later than that. And they have to have at least a couple customers, people using it, ideally people paying for it, that I can talk to. Because just like we were talking about before, about entrepreneurs need to like really embed themselves in with the people they're making the products for. I, as an investor, fully recognize that none of these products are being made for me. So my subjective opinion about a product means squat. It really does not matter at all. the vast majority of my diligence is based on talking to customers. Why are they using it? What were they using before? What problem is it solving? How big is that problem? Is this really making a difference in their lives or their staff's lives or the residents' lives? That's what so much of it is based on. And so I need to be able to talk to people that are using it, that you've sold it to, and to be able to do that. So if you're a little early, you might not get a response from me, at least as fast.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that asking for customers and users already is so important. I get to look at a fair number of products and services as they, want us to talk about it. And I know the same is true for Abby. And so often I see two things. I see people come up with things that are just really cool ideas or seem like really cool ideas. And I go look at it and you say, well, how does this actually really solve a problem? And it's sort of, it's like VR glasses that are going to sit under the bed. It's not very practical. And then the other thing I see is often the pricing is just insane. There was a VR company I talked to a number of years ago when the price they were putting on, and I don't know, I don't think they exist anymore, but it was just like, nobody's going to pay for that. And so makes perfect sense. Abby, last question, last word before we say goodbye.
I'm just completely impressed and thrilled about the things that you're bringing to the table. So keep up the good work. And if anyone wants to go look at your website, there are links there also to Labrador, which I think is awesome and definitely fills a need. So I'm really thrilled to get to know you today and to meet with you. Thank you.
You as well, Abby. And thanks again, Steve, for having me on. Thank
you, Max. Thank you, Abby. I hope you all have a great weekend. If you're going to be at Leading Edge next week, be sure and look me up. If you've got a great story, we'd love to hear it. Maybe jump on some live streams with you. But we're going to have three of us there. Farrah will be there, and Rachel will be there, and we'll be just looking for stories and telling stories. And more importantly than anything else, thank you for changing the lives of older people. It is noble work that we are all doing together. And so, Abby, Max, stay on for just a second as we close it out.